I know a mother who has some really troubled kids. I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but these kids are just very unhappy, in trouble at school, argue with each other. It's really quite a mess, back and forth between her and the ex, and actually a fairly typical unhappy, dysfunctional home. And then she learned to feel loved. We've talked about this a lot. What are the steps to being happy? You find love, you trust love, you remember that you're loved, and then you share it with other people. Well, I'll be darned if she didn't just do exactly what she was told to do. I get asked this all the time. So what's the difference between the people who change their lives and the people that don't? The people who change their lives find a coach, they find somebody to trust, I don't care who, that's been doing it long enough that they're not going to hurt you, and just do it. She just did it. So she learned how, she trusted, she remembered, she learned how to give it to her kids. She went home, did everything. I mean, by the book. She'd call and say, okay, I have to have an interaction with this kid. What do I do? Do this. She'd just go do that. It actually is easier. It turns out it's much easier to completely trust than to partially trust. I've been out on all kinds of incredibly dangerous adventures, hanging from cliffs and climbing mountains and doing whitewater kayaking and canoeing. And I've discovered that if you half trust the guide, you just will be on your own. So trust. So when I go and do crazy, dangerous things, or I go to a new country, whatever, I just find somebody who knows what they're doing, and I do what they say. She did that. So she had one child, young teenager, just angry. I mean, this kid was like a camel. He just spit venom. He wouldn't talk to her. He wouldn't let her touch him. He was just a prickly porcupine everywhere he went. She simply did everything I suggested that she do. I'm not going to go into all the details here. Read the parenting book. It's mostly in there. And she called and said 3 days later, she said, this boy wants her to touch him. On the 3rd day, asked if he could sleep in her bed so that she could hold him. This is a boy who was untouchable and had been for like a year. Put his head on her chest and just cried. Now imagine how she feels. And yet I have parents tell me, oh, I just have this impossible child. And I'm thinking, I doubt it. I doubt that you do. It's all about how we treat them. So here's an impossible child who in 3 days has changed. One child had been diagnosed with a severe learning disability, so dyslexia, ADD, who knows what things, but really having difficulty in school. 1 week after this woman started loving this child, and the child quit being as distracted by the emotional pain he was in constantly, his reading scores improved 40% and took him out of the category of learning disabled. That's crazy cool. Kids don't do well in pain. Imagine if everywhere you went, I followed you and, periodically just stabbed you in the leg with a fork and twisted it around. Well, you wouldn't do all that well at work either, or on a bus, or on a train, or with green eggs and ham. You just wouldn't do well while you're in pain. Neither do kids. And the way out of pain for kids is to love them. This mother is my hero. New subject. Here's somebody who writes and says, I've been doing real love for more than a year, and I still get angry. You have, and you do still get pretty angry. You're very impatient with yourself. You learned real love in your head, and then you expected that the behavior would follow just immediately. You need to remember the times that you've felt loved. Not just remember them in your head. Remember them till you feel them. Not, oh yeah, I remember that time. No, that's not remembering the feeling. That's remembering the occasion and your brain. Remember when you felt loved. That was real. You're impatient to transfer that to everything immediately, and it's just a little too soon. You continue, sometimes I just feel like I don't want to struggle with the world anymore, like many of us feel. So many people are unloving. Sometimes I can't even love my own family. When I am loving other people, I feel connected to you. And I remember when you held me and loved me. But I'm with my family most often, and I'm feeling kind of at a loss with what to do with my family. Understandable. Loving our family members is almost always harder. Remember, it's our family that put us where we are. It's our family that put us where we are in a condition of afraid, empty, angry, and so on. And our family members, the newness is worn off, so we can't fool them and they can't fool us, and everybody knows the trade. They know you. So you don't get a hit each time that you're kind because they've come to expect certain kind behaviors from you. Use me to love you. Use other people to love you, other people that you already know. You'll get there. Your family might lag behind a little bit. You might not go as fast as you'd like to go, and you're doing just fine. New subject. This is from a work supervisor who has practiced real love for several years. He described being unhappy at work that day, that things had not gone according to plan. Some employee had performed below the usual standards. So, in other words, the usual supervisor at work stuff. The supervisor writes, I wrote to the guy who had performed badly that I was unkind to him this morning. I realized that I had bullied him, which made me feel bad inside and made me feel stupid and guilty. And I told him this, which I sent by email only because I'm now many miles from where he is and I couldn't phone him. It just wasn't possible. And I said, I'm so sorry that I was tough on you this morning. Work has been difficult and I've been getting pretty tired, so I took it out on you, which was wrong of me. It's true that you should know about those manuals that you are assigned to read. Apparently the employee had made some mistakes because he hadn't read the prescribed manuals. And you should know where everything is in the office, as you didn't. And I hope that you will become more familiar with all of that by creating a spreadsheet with the name of every manual in the office along with its location in the office. This is beautifully done. It's appropriate to remind him of what he should have known along with your apology. Because you're being sincere, because I can feel the sincerity of your writing, your apology is not negated by your telling him, but you still need to do your job. Because there are some people who, when you apologize to them for being unkind, go, oh, well, then he was just wrong about telling me to do the job too. Now you can't have that confusion. If you simply apologize, many people feel justified in their poor performance. So you just did a masterful job. And if you simply deliver the lecture again, like you did this morning, then it's just being mean. So you did just beautifully. You concluded the email to him by saying, but I should not have been so impatient with you. And I'm truly sorry for my harsh tone of voice, which must have been hurtful. Now, here it gets interesting, what the supervisor says. This is beautiful. I also should know what's in those manuals. And I don't. So I am every bit as much in the wrong as you. Now, that is one cool supervisor. He concludes, so I'm sorry, and I'll do all I can to avoid talking to you like that again. This is just beautiful. So very nice job of being loving, teaching, and telling the truth about your own mistake. Nice job any supervisor, any place, in any job could use. New subject. This is from a public school teacher who says, I've been struggling so much with behavior in my classroom. even though I've been teaching for years. On Wednesday, I gathered them and I said that I wanted to address the behavior in the classroom and I needed their help to sort it out. That was very brave of you to ask for their help about improving their behavior. Risky, but brave. You continue. I expressed my concern that the students were not able to learn because the classroom environment was just getting too crazy. Interruptions, noise, disrespect toward me and each other, complete inattention, and more. We talked about it for the whole hour. It was painful for me because several times the kids said things to me like, "You're just too nice," and "You should be more strict." They were actually asking me to be more strict. I don't get it. It doesn't seem to make sense, but it really does. The students intuitively recognize, as we all do, the need for law. Ask police officers. They'll go into some neighborhoods where people will call them names and they have a bad attitude toward the police. But if somebody is shot in their neighborhood, who do they call? They call the police. And if something is systemically wrong, then they march in front of City Hall and they ask the government to do something about it. The universe is governed by immutable, eternal laws. Happiness is governed by law. And somehow these kids know that. That's pretty smart, pretty insightful. They are not asking for more harshness from you. They're just asking for law and order and predictability. What they're saying is, you're so nice that you throw the rules out the window and then nobody knows how to behave. So they just pick behaviors randomly out of the air. They just react to whatever pain they're experiencing, and the classroom just becomes a mess. They want sense in the chaos of the world that they know at home and elsewhere. You continue. I discovered then that what I'm really afraid of is that if I enforce the consequences, the kids will get upset and angry at me, and I want to avoid their anger. Every time I could give a consequence, I'm reluctant to face their anger, so I run, and I'm irresponsible. How lovely for you to see this. Of course they get irritated when you enforce consequences. Everybody understands the need for law. Everybody does. If you were to ask 100 people in a row, do there need to be speed limits? I'm pretty sure 99.9% of people would say, yeah, we pretty much have to have speed limits. You can't have people racing 150 miles an hour through a school zone, for example. So everybody gets law, but nobody likes the consequences. Almost. So we understand there need to be speed limits, but when the policeman pulls us over and gives us a ticket, then we don't like speed limits. See, then they're unreasonable. Nobody likes consequences. I don't pay the electric bill. I would prefer not to pay the electric bill, but I don't like it if they turn off the power. I drive too fast. I don't like the ticket that I get. I'm late turning in my paper at school. I don't like getting a letter grade taken off my grade for the paper. But deep down, even though I don't like the consequences, I somehow know, even as a kid, that the alternative, which is no consequences, would be worse, considerably worse. Imagine a world with no traffic laws, no requirements to pay electric bills, nobody who cared about whether the streets were repaired, no consequence for work poorly done. There would be accidents everywhere. There would be no power in our homes. There would be shoddy workmanship in the roads, computers, and worst of all, for kids, there would be no cell phones. Kids don't like the inconvenience of consequences, just like adults, but they prefer order. And that's what they're asking you to provide. Because, see, then they have to provide the order, and they're not old enough or mature enough to do that. They prefer order and predictable results and productivity over chaos. You continue. I also realized that with the system that the administration wanted me to use, which was 2 warnings. So I warn a student 2 times, and then comes the consequence. That essentially I was training the misbehaving students to act out 2 times. To act out within those limits. So they would misbehave in a grand way twice, then they would fall back in line so that they didn't get the final consequence. Well, that's a disaster. And I'm thinking, yeah, no kidding. What a stupid administrative move. The administrators, like you're afraid of the disapproval of your students, the administrators are afraid of the parents who have raised these entitled children. Every day, I know lots of administrators, they are beset with parents who whine about how their special, spoiled, entitled, and perfect child couldn't possibly have broken the rules that he or she was accused of. I know many teachers. I know teachers who have been fired because, like, for example, in a private school, somebody who gives hefty donations to the school, when the teacher simply requires homework of their rich, spoiled, entitled child, the administrator comes down and tells the teacher, well, you have to let that student pretty much do what they want. Now imagine how that classroom works. Because I've heard this story more than once. So now this kid doesn't turn in his work, talks during class, puts his feet up on the desk of the chair in front of him, even if somebody's sitting there. So, and the teacher's been told, you can't say anything to this kid. What do you think the rest of the kids in the class are doing? They're mimicking the kid who's spoiled and entitled. And when she says something to them, they go, well, Johnny the rich kid's doing it. Well, yeah, you think? My daughter, Jeanette, who was a public high school teacher in French, once caught a child who was just blatantly cheating on a test. When I was in school and you cheated on a test, they suspended you from school for 3 days. You got all Fs for 3 days. She gave this child simply an F, not a 0, just an F, for the one test that the child cheated on. The very next day, in come the parents. They berate the administrators. The administrators are afraid of the parents. And sure enough, the administrator made Jeanette, the teacher of the class, change the grade from an F to, I can't remember, a C plus or something, on a paper where the kid cheated. Unthinkable. It's a generation of kids who think, I can do whatever I want to. And employers are telling me this more and more. Kids come and say, so when's my coffee break? Before they've started the day. When they're halfway through the day, they go, well, where's my trophy for participation? Because that's what they got in school. So you're right about the supervisors. Back to the teacher. It's not about warning. It's not about how many warnings. It's called loving and teaching. Read the parenting book. Then, after a child understands, after you've sufficiently loved the kids that they know that you care about them, and you've taught them a principle once where the whole class understands it. They're not retarded. They understood the principle. We don't throw balls across the classroom. Then the consequence is immediate. There's no warning. No, it's right then. After enough loving and teaching where you're sure they get it, they get a consequence every time they break the rules. Why? Because this mimics the world they're going to grow up and live in, where, for example, every single time you drive too fast around a curve, guess what? Gravity never goes, oh, it's okay, your parents have called me and we're going to suspend gravity. No, you crash. Every time you drop a glass, it breaks gravity again. Every time you don't mow your lawn, it grows too long, and now it's nearly impossible to mow, and your neighbors call the city, and then they come by and give you a fine. We actually had somebody in our neighborhood who got sued by the neighbors because he wouldn't mow his lawn, and he got a $1,300 fine. No, we get a consequence every time. Every time you miss work, they don't pay you. Every time you drive your car too fast on a wet road, it slips. It just goes on and on. Every time you fail to replace your tires in time, you get blowouts, and more. So if you don't do consequences for breaking the rules every time, the rules including the consequence. See, the rule includes the consequence. You teach them that you are in charge of their behavior and their consequences. So I'm going to say that again because it could be unclear. If you don't do the consequences for the rules every time, you teach them that you will pay for the consequences. So when they throw the ball and they make noise and they disrupt the class, you pay the price of having a class that's out of control. That's just insane. When you drop a glass, it's not a personality that breaks it. Gravity does. It's a law. When you speed around a curve, it's gravity and physics. It's not a person. That's why I emphasize you're not enforcing the consequences. The kids are choosing them. When my kids were little, they just hated it when I would do what I refer to as lightly mocking them. So there would be a consequence. They wanted to go out with their friends, but they didn't weed the patch in the backyard that they were supposed to. And I would go, oh, I was thinking that you kind of wanted to go out with your friends. They immediately caught on that I didn't feel bad at all. I wasn't punishing them. They had chosen not to go out with their friends, and being lightly mocked, they felt a little stupid for making a dumb choice. And that's what the kids in your class need to feel. So if they get a consequence every time, they realize that they determine the consequence, because the choice and the consequence always go together. You continue. On Thursday, I implemented the change. I gave them one warning. So you decided, instead of no warnings, you decided to give them one. Up to you. By passing them a yellow slip of paper. That's the only warning they get. Then the next time they misbehave, poof, they get the consequence with a red slip of paper. Thursday and Friday were like a different world. They behaved completely differently. It was enjoyable. And my co-teacher commented that Friday was the best day we've had in class all year. Sure, because you didn't separate choice and consequence. That's what, when you keep together choice and consequence, that's called being responsible. That's the name for that. It actually has a name. And we're there to teach our kids to be responsible. If they break the law and no consequence happens, they learn to be irresponsible. So way to go. You say, I'm also planning to reward the students for being on task, for avoiding warnings and for getting their work done. I wouldn't recommend that so much. Kids who are rewarded for example, behaving well in class, because I know teachers who have tried this, they will behave well and then they'll turn to the teacher and say, well, where's my reward? Try that at work. Or somebody send me a letter if you've ever been pulled over by the police, lights, whirring and siren blaring, and they pull you over to say, for the last several miles, you haven't broken any traffic laws. No, that's not how it works either. We're expected to keep the rules. So if a child does particularly well, you just ask them. You say, I've been noticing how you've been feeling over the last couple of days as you've been keeping the rules. Do you notice how it feels? It's really fun to watch a kid, just like as I was describing earlier, a mother who after 3 days had a bratty, whiny, complaining child who wouldn't let her touch him. After 3 days, he had his head on her chest and wanted to sleep in her bed, so she told him. The reward for good behavior is feeling happy. That's the reward. And you point that out to them. You say, how have you felt? And they say, well, I've been feeling pretty good. Exactly. You've been feeling pretty good because of the choices you've made. You conclude, if I'm still doing something stupid, will you let me know? I'm relieved to know that I can do this. I can be nice, maintain my happiness, and still keep order in the classroom. Teaching might actually turn out to be fun. It really can be. So can parenting. So can life. So love and teach for a while, and then for the rest of the year, try eliminating the warning. Go straight to the consequences. You'll see that their behavior will improve even further. New subject. Someone called to talk about their fear when what they refer to as an androgynous waiter served their table, and how to refer to him or her. So their waiter was not obviously male or female, and they didn't know what is the proper protocol. What do you call this person? Him, her? That guy? That person? You human? It? What do you do? And in today's climate, oh my goodness, it's just become so volatile that you don't know what to call people. There's a website that will detail sexual preferences. And it turns out I was completely stupid. I thought there was, male and female and gay and transsexual and asexual and bisexual, and no, it turns out there are at least 80 classifications of sexual preference. So I admit that I was surprised at how ignorant I was. So I'm just telling you, your question is quite understandable. You continue and you say, is it appropriate to ask the waiter how they would like to be referred to? And what would that question look and sound like? The question of what pronoun to use came up as the table was discussing the specials with the waiter standing there. You could ask. Most people would not be insulted, but see, some people really would. Like, really would. Like, I know some women who look fairly masculine, and they're really offended when somebody refers to them as a him or he. It just really hurts their feelings. They didn't intend to look masculine. They just don't look very feminine. Bone structure, skin, they just don't. What I suggest is there's no reason for a pronoun. Why would you need one? If you're sitting there discussing what you're going to order, you just say, well, why don't we ask our waiter? I mean, it's just not that complicated. In other words, why make a thing of it? We don't ask heterosexuals how they do sex, do we? No. So why ask people whose sexual preference or sexual performance is in question? Why ask them questions? Why make a sexual thing with people of different preferences? If a waiter comes up to you and says, I want to be referred to as, because there are some sexual preferences where they refer to themselves as they, and they like their friends to call them they. If your waiter comes up and says, you can call me they, swell. I will call you anything you want, including broccoli. I'll call you anything. But until then, why make a fuss? New subject. Here's a mother of a 3-year-old. And she said, I just need to tell you something funny that Thomas said today, her 3-year-old. When I met up with my neighbors, she asked her son, Elijah, can you say hi to Thomas, my 3-year-old? And her son said hi to Thomas, obediently, like children do when parents say thank you, say hi, do this, say please. When I tell parents, watch yourself all day long and see how many times you tell your child to do something that is really pretty much unnecessary or none of your business, and they're stunned at how often they do it. So the mother said, Elijah, can you say hi to Thomas? And he did. And then I asked Thomas if he wanted to say hi too. And this 3-year-old kid, there are 35-year-old people that I wish had this kind of courage. The 3-year-old said, I could go either way. I could either do no hi or I could say hi. I'm not sure yet. Mom says, I just loved how he saw his options and felt free to do either one. I think I said something like, okay, it's up to you. And he chose to say nothing. But they played happily together after that. I think 3-year-olds could pretty much handle how to greet each other without being told how to do that by their parents who tell them how to do everything else. Put these pants on, put your socks on, get dressed, scrub behind your ears. It just gets to be a dictatorship all day long. We tend to shackle our children to social customs that really serve no real purpose. 2 3-year-olds saying hi to each other as though somehow they didn't notice the 3-year-old was there. Sure they do. These customs tend not to bind people together. They don't. They make people a little more comfortable in some social circumstances. Hi, how are you? Fine. What do you do for a living? And then they have no idea what to say. But it doesn't last very long. These questions and these things that we say, these customs, don't create genuine community. They simply create the appearance of community and real concern. And so essentially, by doing them, we're perpetuating lies. New subject. A woman who's relatively new in real love has a teenager. Rebellious, difficult. She would love and teach this kid and then occasionally remove the phone. It worked. Every time the phone was removed, the teenager's behavior would improve. After enough times of doing this, the mother noticed that the daughter initially did great with removal of the phone. But every single time the daughter got the phone back, within an hour of getting the phone. So this isn't about some other behavior that she has, like she has a tendency to be angry or rude or not clean up after herself in the kitchen. No, just getting the phone back, the bad behaviors would return. She would become snippy and difficult and impatient, distant, grouchy, use bad language. And the mother finally went, whoa, I think I got it now. The kid is addicted just to the phone. Look up symptoms of phone addiction, symptoms of electronics addiction. Look it up on Google anytime you want to. And they're all listed right there, and you can see if your child's addicted to use of these things. And so mom just removed it, not because the child was behaving badly, but because the child was addicted, behaved like an addict. Mom writes and says this: we just completed a long weekend, my daughter and I, and it went smooth as lemon chiffon. I never heard that expression. My daughter, right this moment, as we speak, is doing handstands, the teenager, in the family room while she's trying out her new clothes that she just bought. So I guess that's one way to see if they stretch and fit right, is to do handstands. I personally don't use that technique. I would say because it's too much work, but because I can't do a handstand. And mom says, I'm seeing a kid with energy to burn, smiles all over the place, and who is using her witty sense of humor again. My dear, you could be a witness to parents everywhere about the effects of addiction to electronics. Again, I suggest everybody look them up. Mom concludes, we spent a lot of time bantering, laughing, enjoying each other's company. We went bike riding. We grilled for dinner. We went grocery shopping, just regular stuff. She got her homework done tonight while I was sitting in my chair. It is amazing to me. And oh, by the way, she applied for a summer job. She wouldn't have done any of these things if she had her phone. Not one of them. They would all have gone uncompleted. Well, this is pretty definitely an addiction. An addiction, for the benefit of those of you who are new to the term, we tended in the old days to refer to somebody as an addict who couldn't quit alcohol or drugs. It was pretty obvious, and they lived under the bridge, and they smelled real bad and changed clothes. Never. No, the definition of addiction, now you can read it on the website. The definition is anybody who uses a substance or a behavior in a way that is counterproductive to their happiness or their relationships with others, and which they can't easily give up, the substance or behavior. Well, this phone use classifies in every respect. Addicts become, when they're withdrawn from their addiction, jittery, inattentive, like they have ADD. They become combative, argumentative, disobedient. You can read the list. It goes on, and it applies to kids and adults. Very smart mother. Just like an adult woman once said to me, my husband watches a lot of football. Is he addicted or not? And I said, easy. Go over and just turn off the television. Don't announce it. Just go turn it off. And if he blows up, he's an addict. Whereas if Donna comes in the room and she does this, she'll come in the room and she'll just turn it off, or she'll hit pause on a movie or whatever. And I just turn to her and say, yeah, because clearly there's something that she wants. I don't have to be watching a screen. So that's the difference, is easily giving it up. New subject. We do so many little things that interfere with our relationships. One example that I'm going to discuss here just briefly is often underestimated, and that is the effect of questions. I've had a couple of people in the last couple of weeks bring up situations that made me think of this. Just simply asking questions. And we do it all day. Why are you doing that? We say to somebody. Where are you going? Who was that on the phone? This is a really common one. These are really intrusive personal questions. And when the questions are directed at us, we often feel attacked. Why? Because it's a form of PTSD. When we were little kids, or PCSD, take your pick, when we were little kids and our parents came in the room and said, well, why are you doing that? That wasn't a question. They weren't looking for us to explain why we were doing this. Well, see, the reason that I'm doing, no, they were saying, why are you doing that when I told you not to? Why are you doing that stupidly? Why aren't you doing that my way? Why are you doing that instead of your homework? It starts off as a question, but it's really an accusation. We could hardly twitch out of a chair as children without our parents saying, where are you going? Who are you going with? Who are your friends? Do we have certification papers from your friends? Oh, and do we have copies of the passports of their parents? We were grilled as kids. And now, oddly, we continue to do it as adults. And we don't like being asked these questions. We're parking. I've watched this with more couples than I can count. And one of them is parking, and the one in the passenger seat says, well, why don't you park over there? Or why did you leave the door open? Or why don't you do this? Or why don't you get in that lane? Or why don't you? And sometimes in the back of my head, all I want to do is say, why don't you just shut up? Because on the whole, we don't like to be asked questions. We don't like to be grilled. And then we justify when we ask questions. We say, well, it was just a question. Rarely is that the case. Rarely was it curiosity. It was probing. It was doubting. It was requiring a justification. Or people say, I was just curious. And I want to say, well, then read the Encyclopedia Britannica and get over your curiosity. Nearly a year ago, Donna, for example, this is just an example that came into my head the other day. About a year ago, Donna asked for a number of sticks, tree limbs. They didn't have to be straight, but kind of. And she kind of showed me what they needed to look like, and she wanted like 10 of them. Each was about 4 feet long and anywhere from 1 to 3 inches in diameter. And so I used the chainsaw, and it didn't take me long to get 10 tree branches. And then I gathered them up together, and I put them out on the deck. And every once in a while, when I pass them, I go, I still wonder, what are those for? Somebody was with me one day and said, what are those sticks for? And I said, absolutely no idea. And she said, well, then why are they sitting there? I said, because Donna asked me for them. That's the answer to why questions in almost every case. You ask an adult human being why, the answer is because I want to. For some reason, she wanted 10 sticks. So I cut 10 sticks. They may be there when I'm dead, but I am not going to ask her why they're there. And I don't care if she ever uses them. So what is the harm in asking people questions all the time? Unless you need to know, it's a way of making people prove that their reasoning is sufficient. We make them prove it to meet our standards. It diminishes people to be required to answer stupid questions. It really does. It makes them feel smaller. In fact, I teach people who are grilled by, these are adults, these are 35 and 40-year-old people who are constantly grilled, where are you going, what are you doing, why, by their 70-year-old parents. We actually practice, and I teach them to never answer another one of those questions again, because it makes them feel small. They feel intruded upon. They feel less than. So bottom line is, we just need to be careful and not worried, not cautious, just be aware of when we ask a question, does it really have a useful purpose? You're going to be really surprised how many silly questions you ask. I know a mother who's been practicing real love for some time, and she is writing about her 3-year-old. And the 3-year-old, different 3-year-old than we talked about earlier, the 3-year-old said to her mother just the other day, Mommy, will you brush my teeth now that you know how to love me? I love kids because they just cut right to it. Now that you know how to love me, would you brush my teeth? Because before that, why would you trust somebody who doesn't love you to take this great big plastic handled thing with bristles on it and shove it around in your mouth? So the mother is wise. She says, when did I learn how to love you? And the child immediately said, Friday. Friday. And then the mom thought about it, and she remembered that for 2 or 3 days prior to Friday, she'd been snippy and short for various reasons, doesn't matter what they are. And then she thought better of it, and Friday she started being extra loving to her child. What a lesson for the mother. And all of this over brushing teeth. Now, I wonder why children who are older don't want to talk to their parents, because they don't feel loved by them. Or why did this entire classroom that the teacher was talking about not want to follow the directions of the teacher? Because they didn't feel loved by the teacher. If they could, kids would say, can I talk to you when you learn how to love me and listen? And all of this wisdom out of the mouth of a 3-year-old. Brilliant. New subject. At work, there is a periodic team building event. Happens once or twice a year. We go to a guest house and we spend a day there together. And I don't particularly like these events. Everybody's drinking, everybody's trying to impress each other. I would rather stay at work that day, and that's an option. But I feel obligated to go. On the other hand, I feel bad for not wanting to go, as it could come across to my colleagues that I don't enjoy spending time with them, which is partially true. Does this event even count as a work-related mandatory thing? And should I do it whether I want to or not? I wrote back in response, I would suggest asking your boss. Your boss is the only person who can, with absolute accuracy, tell you whether this is a mandatory work-related event. Ask him how important this is to him, and tell him you don't particularly enjoy the drinking that goes on there. She wrote back, second email. She said, I did what you said, which is always a little surprising. I talked to the boss, and he's concerned about the drinking too. But he hadn't done anything because nobody had said anything. So I was the first voice to speak up. So now we're trying to fill the event with things to do so it's more interesting, and possibly consider removing the alcohol. When I see this event as part of work, it actually gets easy. Then I don't feel resistant anymore to being there. I don't have to like it. I will be there with no expectations for them to love me or to have fun. I'm just going to go because it's just part of what I am paid to do. Well, good for you. You'd have been justified either way. After what the boss said, you could have gone to work and stayed there. He would have supported you. You decided to go to the work event because you're paid to go. You've gotten his attention. And if you go to the event, he's going to see that you're supportive of the work environment, and he'll pay more attention to the amount of drinking that's going on there. So you did good. When in doubt at work, ask the boss. This is from a woman who has been practicing real love for a while. She said this: I heard a story once. A young woman was on a train journey, sitting opposite an upper-class elderly woman who pretty obviously had seen better days. So she was from the upper class clearly, but not so much now as she used to be. So the young woman falls asleep, and when she wakes, the older woman is asleep too. They're on a train, remember. The young woman opens her purse and sees that the $10 bill that she had at the top of her purse is gone. She searches every pocket, no $10 bill. She starts to look over at the older woman's things, looks into her unzipped handbag, and there is the $10 bill. Rather than embarrass the old woman by waking her and asking her for her money back, she just gingerly and politely, quietly extracts the $10, then gets off the train at the next stop, which was her stop anyway. She decides to harbor no ill feelings against the old woman, didn't bring it up. And when she gets home that evening, there is the $10 bill on her breakfast table. She'd never brought it. She'd never brought it in her purse. She just thought that she had. The person who sent me the letter said, I was reminded of this today. The maintenance man at my apartment block is very sweet with me, speaks to me kindly every time, and I allow him access to my apartment to fix things when I'm not home. He was here today. When I got back and opened the bedside drawer for the money that I'd put there before I left, the 2 bills that I'd put there were not there. I checked thoroughly. I had a really yucky feeling in my stomach, more from the thing, being violated than the loss of some money, which wasn't all that great. I decided I was just going to let it go. This guy had always been nice to me. He'd always fixed things for me. Consider it a tip. I picked up my bag next to the table to put my remaining money into it, and there were the 2 bills that I had thought were in my drawer. Oh, how foolish I would have felt if I had confronted him. It's a lovely little lesson about our judgments and how slow we need to be to make them, and how much happier we are if we don't make them. I have regrettably, awfully, on at least one occasion, said to Donna, where are my keys? The last time I saw them, you borrowed them, so I'm sure that you had them, because she occasionally borrows my keys because she's going to go on an errand and she can't find hers. And I go, I don't care. But then I go to get the keys and I say, I need my keys, and could you please go get them for me? And she does the sweetest thing every time. She goes, she finds the keys, she brings them back, she just hands them to me, and she turns to leave. She doesn't say anything. I have to ask, where did you find the keys? She'll say, I forgot that I put them in your pants pocket. Which of course means I put them in my pants pocket. I didn't look for them there. She could sense the little accusation that it was her fault that I couldn't find my keys. She didn't even address it, just went and found the keys and dropped them into my guilty little hands. New subject. Here's somebody who says, how can I be loving to my sister. Yesterday she talked about her husband. My sister talked about her husband, who has been gone for a while back to the country where we were all raised, in India. He does that every year or two. She doesn't know when he's going to be back to where we live now in New York City, where both my sister and I live. That's really fairly inconsiderate. And I know a lot of people who do that. They just disappear. They go on vacation. They go to see their family or whatever. And they don't give their spouse or their family any idea of when they're returning. Really kind of not fun not knowing what is happening. And since you asked how you could love your sister, rather than complain with her, you could just say, that's just got to be no fun not knowing when he's going to return, and that you understand that it's difficult. Then you continue and you say some context. His mom lives there in India. He has been unemployed for several years. Several years ago, he had a good job, but he quit his job because he said, he just wasn't happy there. And since then has been piddling around saying that he's starting his own small business. But he's never started his own small business. So he's just been not working and living off my sister for several years now. And now he's claiming that, when he's in India, he's going to start a small business there. But see, my sister doesn't know any of the details. She doesn't know what he does. She doesn't know what he does all day. She doesn't know what he's doing in India. She doesn't know but what he's going to be in India for the next 20 years. His being unemployed for several years is a pretty terrible sign in a partner. Partners don't omit that kind of information with each other. I don't go in the backyard without Donna knowing where I am. Why? I've been asked that. Well, why did you tell her where she was, that you were just going into the backyard? Because, let me think, because she's my partner. She's the other half of me. How would I go somewhere without telling her where I was? His being unemployed indicates that he's pretty irresponsible, and he expects her to take care of him without ever saying so. He just expects to sit around and play during the day and have her take care of him while he plays video games, or while he plays with these businesses that never really turn into anything and have never sold even $5 worth of goods. You could be more loving, because that was your original question, by telling her that this must be difficult for her to have her husband be unemployed and to have no sign of him ever getting employment, and to have her have the job as the primary wage earner without it ever really being a discussion. He just plopped it in her lap and then let her express her feelings about it. That would be a loving thing to do. You continue. He's been there in India for 2 weeks now and hasn't given any signs of being alive. That's unusual because they used to text each other many times a day. He hasn't texted at all, which again is proof of what I just said. He wants to play. He's made that pretty clear after being unemployed for several years, and do nothing while other people support him. And you can be certain that in India, somebody is supporting him. Somebody's feeding him, somebody's giving him a bed, and he's doing nothing. Pretty poor sense of responsibility. You continue. My sister has asked family members around him there in India just to be sure that he's there, because he hasn't texted. She wants to know if he's alive. He didn't even text her to say, I've arrived in India, which you would think you would do, but it's a long way from New York to India. She finally got an email from him telling her to contact him only by email, not text, like they used to do a lot, and that he's sprained his ankle. Her tone was pretty victim-y to me, implying that he could have contacted her earlier and more often. And she's right, that he could contact his own wife more often than that. When I'm away from home, I text or email or talk to Donna several times a day. So what could your sister do? Like you asked, how could I be more loving? How could I be of greater assistance to my sister? Her acting like a victim about it won't help her. But she could ask him to contact her every day in some way, by text, by email. Why? To see how he's doing, because they're partners, to gather information from his response. She will learn a lot from his responses. And if you help her interpret his responses without her, let's just call it really naive optimism, because he's not been working for several years and she hasn't made any requirement that he even go look for a job. So what could you say? You could say, I understand your pain. You're in a marriage where your husband is being irresponsible and not loving towards you, which is difficult. He behaves badly in a lot of ways, but complaining about him won't help you. The real question is, what are you going to do about it? This is what you could say to your sister, because your sister really doesn't know what to do, or she would have done something before now about her husband being unemployed and going to India whenever the heck he feels like going. She has the usual 3 choices. She can live with it, like it, including improving on it, live with it and hate it, or leave it. You say, I didn't say anything else. I could see her emptiness and pain, and I was in pain for her. She texted me today to say that several people from our family have called him to tell him that he needs to contact my sister, his wife, but he still hasn't called her. So what loving response can I give? We've talked about the loving responses you could give, and I think she would enjoy having somebody understand her situation. You're not telling her what to do. You're not sympathizing with her. Oh, poor you. You're just understanding her. You're understanding her predicament. You're understanding that it's difficult, and you're reminding her of the 3 choices that we have in everything. You say, I know that they're not happy. They dispute with each other a lot, sometimes even in front of us. My sister tells me it's normal, that that's how husbands and wives are. It could be a loving thing. You'll have to watch her face as you say it to tell her, no, dear, that's not how husbands and wives are. That's how unhappy husbands and wives are. And you two are very unhappy. You have essentially a non-marriage. He goes wherever he wants to go, just like a single person. He doesn't work. She supports him. That's actually worse than, that's a better deal for him than being a single person. And she very possibly doesn't even recognize all this. Can't tell you how many people I've talked to who are being abused and used by a partner, and because that's how they've been treated all their lives, they just accept it as normal. You say, I know that he had an affair with another woman several years ago and isn't responsible about money and a lot of things in their home. My sister told me, my children are my only reason to live and my only source of happiness. I wanted to tell her that is not enough reason to stay married, but I shut my mouth. Well, darling, you asked me a question, so I'm going to answer your question. Don't shut your mouth. Say some of the things that we just talked about. She's never had anybody do anything except use her, abuse her, or whine and complain with her and act like a victim. She's looking for genuine direction, and you can give that while being understanding. She needs to know that her husband is and was irresponsible. You might describe some of the ways that she has been unloving to him too, and just help her see that they really need significant help with their marriage, and that they always have the 3 choices: live with it and like it, live with it and hate it, or leave it. We all have that choice. Until we feel loved, however, until we have found enough love in our lives, until we've trusted that we're being loved, until we remember that we're loved, until we learn how to share love with other people, even though love is a choice, we don't see it. So we all need to learn how to find, trust, remember, and share love. I'll see you again in a week.